this hearing underway. Representative Wentley, if you could lead us in the pledge. I'm going to let these reps get their name tags and come sit down here. We are going to be having reps coming in and out. It's the nature of having a hearing on 10:30 on a session day. But this issue is a very important issue, and we wanted to make sure that we were covering the topic of what's going on. So, all right. All right. Representative Kephart, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Dallas Kephart, 73rd District, Clearfield and Cambria Counties.
Good morning. I'm Jamie Barton, 124th Legislative District. That's Schuylkill County and Berks County.
Joe Diorsi, the 47th in Eastern York County.
Josh Kale, 15th Legislative District.
Representative Martina White, Northeast Philadelphia.
Representative Eric Nelson, Westmoreland County.
Park Wentling, State Representative in the 7th Legislative District in Mercer County.
Representative White, thank you for being here today. Thank you for leading on this issue. If you'd like to make some opening comments, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman Kale and members of the Policy Committee. I really appreciate the opportunity to make sure that this important topic is discussed here in Harrisburg. First and foremost, Pennsylvania's natural gas reserves have the potential to drive economic growth, inspire innovation, and create new opportunities. As the second largest producer of natural gas in the United States, we recognize the impact a flourishing energy sector can have on our state. It is not only about job creation, but resurging industries, revitalizing communities, and empowering our workforce. It's about opening doors for aspiring engineers, skilled laborers, and ambitious entrepreneurs to shape their future, a future that requires sustainable energy. Last year, I had the privilege of chairing the Philadelphia LNG Export Task Force, which examined the potential for an LNG export terminal in southeastern PA. Our task force found this export terminal project could have the potential to create tens of thousands of jobs, billions of dollars in yearly economic output, and hundreds of millions in state and local tax revenues to support both statewide and local community services while ensuring Pennsylvanians have access to low-cost energy. Last year, Glenn Thomas, president of the industry group PJM Power Providers, at a State Senate Environmental Resources and Energy Committee briefing, expressed a dire concern regarding electrical grid reliability in Pennsylvania. Thomas warned public officials that PA's ability to supply enough electricity is in danger as reliable power sources continue to be retired from the grid, something that's occurring faster than anticipated. I'm going to keep going, Chairman.
Keep going.
As Senator Gene Yaw spoke recently, he said that demand is going up and supply is leaving and not being replaced. Green energy politics are forcing fossil fuel plants into non-existence, resulting in fewer reliable energy sources to shoulder the burden of an increased demand on Pennsylvania's electrical grid. While PA is on a direct path for an electricity crisis with rolling blackouts, President Biden and Governor Shapiro are proposing initiatives that expedite this collision course. PJM has been sounding the alarm and trying to explain that this electricity crisis is targeted to happen in 2030 and possibly sooner in Pennsylvania. This issue is not a partisan issue. It is an issue for all people in Pennsylvania who want to make sure that when they go to hit the light switch, the lights go on. Democrat Governor Wolf understood the importance of putting an LNG task force together to ensure that PA can access reliable energy sources and supply people with proper energy prices that are affordable for working families. Clearly, U.S. Senators Casey and Fetterman also understand that as they have come out against the president's ban on LNG permits, if it costs Pennsylvania's jobs, and believe me, it does. I'm looking forward to hearing from today's testifiers on what they are seeing across Pennsylvania and hearing from industry leaders on Pennsylvania's energy future after Biden has imposed his ban on future LNG exports. Thank you all very much for being here today, and again, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Secretary White. Thank you for your leadership on this issue. It's a very important issue that touches every corner of this Commonwealth, and you've made it clear throughout the last number of years that it touches the southeast corner. I know it touches the southwest corner coming from there. The northeast corner has a lot of work there. The northwest corner, where the energy industry was born practically. Pennsylvania is a energy-centric state, and we want to keep it that way. With so many of the great questions that are out there that we deal with, in so many ways, Pennsylvania natural gas is the answer. Whether we're talking about job growth, whether we're talking about those good-paying jobs across the Commonwealth that we can and do enjoy, the natural gas industry has helped incredibly. Whether we're talking about reshoring our manufacturing assets, the only way to do that effectively is by using our own energy sources. Whether we're talking about the environment, the dramatic decrease in carbon emissions in this Commonwealth is being driven not by some government policy, it's being driven by the natural gas industry. Or whether we're talking about helping our allies. And this comes today, and during this LNG hearing that we're going to have today, this topic comes up today in a very real sense. Because our LNG can be exported across the world, and we could quite literally be exporting freedom from Pennsylvania. In fact, we are exporting freedom from Pennsylvania right now, but we could be exporting more freedom from Pennsylvania. Because today, Europe is dependent on Russia for its energy sources, but it doesn't have to be. It shouldn't be. And the only reason it is because we don't have our act together in the United States of America to build out our energy resources. And by the way, this maneuver would be also good for our environment because our energy is the cleanest in the world. So I am looking forward to hearing more from our testifiers here today. Mr. Baer, thank you for being here. Mr. Bain, thank you for being here. Mr. Marrara, thank you for being here. I'm going to hand over the floor to you. There have been a number of members that have come in since we started. Representative Rowe, Representative Flick, Representative Cooper, Vice Chairman Eckert, and Representative Barton, and online we have Representative Gleim. So I believe, is Mr. Baer the first to go? I'm sorry, I don't have the order. Oh, no, Mr. Marrara, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good morning, esteemed members of the Pennsylvania House Republican Policy Committee. I'm Carl A. Marrara, the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association, the statewide nonprofit trade organization representing the people who make things here in our Commonwealth. I'm honored to join you today to talk about what liquefied natural gas, commonly referred to as LNG, export facility in Pennsylvania would mean for our economy, our environment, and our role as an energy leader on the global stage. Global LNG demand is high and it's rising. As economies and countries move away from coal, crude oil, and other fuel sources, global demand for LNG is steadily rising. Conflict initiated by Russia and European support for Ukraine has greatly decreased Russia's exports to the European Union. Before 2021, the EU was the largest purchaser of Russian LNG. This market change creates an opportunity for the United States to supply European allies with this needed commodity. The United States is rapidly expanding LNG export capabilities, or at least it was. In 2015, the U.S. exported roughly 28,000 MCF compared to the 4.34 trillion cubic feet in 2023. With the United States now being the largest producer of natural gas in the world, the overall supply of natural gas that's available to meet domestic needs while supplying geopolitical allies is great. The expansion capability is now being directly threatened by the Biden administration's ban on all new LNG terminal permits. More on this later. LNG exports have displaced coal usage worldwide. According to the Energy Information Administration, since 2010, coal to gas switching has saved around 500 million tons of CO2, an effect equivalent of putting an extra 200 million EVs running on zero carbon electricity on the road over that same period. But the Biden administration has effectively put a blockade on all new LNG terminal construction by instituting an indefinite ban on applications approving new facilities. Moreover, here in Pennsylvania, we face our own set of challenges when it comes to siting and permitting these types of projects, making investment in these economy-changing projects uncertain. The bulk of my testimony is centered around a study that I have submitted for your review. We participated in the Philadelphia LNG Task Force hearing and prepared the report entitled LNG Export Greater Philadelphia Area. To complete this study, we utilized an industry standard program called IMPLAN. IMPLAN is a regional economic analysis software application that is designed to estimate the impact or ripple effect, specifically backward linkages of given economic activity within specific geographic area throughout implementation of its input-output model analysis. Using spending patterns each unique industry deploys, it can predict the indirect and induced jobs in a study area. For the purposes of this IMPLAN study, we took the closest LNG export facility, which is Cove Point in Lusby, Maryland, and modeled the construction and full-time operations of that facility as though it existed in Delaware County, Pennsylvania. A previous economic impact study published by the SAGE Public Policy Group in Baltimore provided the inputs for what the actual construction and full-time operations employments numbers were on that project. We also acquired an estimate of total amount of natural gas that the facility uses as a feedstock per year. We added this to the model as well. For this model, the construction phase would be estimated as taking 4 years. It's important to note this is just the construction of the facility. It does not include any of the needed pipeline or other infrastructure that would be needed for a facility like this to be feasible. So construction totals are likely underreported. The study completed by SAGE Policy Group, it was found that during the 4 years of construction of the project to build Cove Point LNG terminal, there was an average of 4,323 construction jobs supported per year. These construction jobs consist of the following categories: 1,017 in environmental and technical services, 3,213 in construction of manufacturing facility, and 93 in industrial equipment servicing and repair. In 1 year, these 4,323 direct jobs would support an additional 1,062 indirect jobs and 1,677 induced jobs within the study area. The full analysis is in your packet, including the top 10 industries by growth percentage, top 7 indirect and induced jobs, how many of these indirect and induced jobs would be in the 5-county area versus the remaining 62 counties in Pennsylvania, and the totals over the 4-year project. Over the 4 years, the construction of the facility would support a total of 28,249 direct, indirect, and induced jobs. This totals more than $2.3 billion in labor income, $2.8 billion in gross state product or value added, and $4.8 billion in total output. Over the 4 years of construction, the tax obligation would be around $527 million in total, with $80 million going to the state, $390 million to federal, and the remaining to local governments. The full-time ongoing operations consist of 204 industrial gases manufacturing jobs. Because this category does not assume LNG production, a commodity event was added to the model to show natural gas intake. Based on the industrial knowledge of Cove Point LNG terminal, this facility uses an average of 1 billion cubic feet of natural gas feedstock per day. Based on current pricing, the value of this natural gas was added to the model as a commodity event. With the 204 industrial gases manufacturing jobs in the commodity event, the ongoing operations of the plant would directly support the employment of 514 positions. The additional 310 jobs are mainly in the area of natural gas production. These 514 jobs would support 1,280 indirect jobs and 1,205 induced jobs. Each year, the labor income from these combined 2,999 jobs would total $432.5 million and add $1.5 billion of gross state product, altogether with an output of $2.5 billion. Each year, the plant is operational. These monetary totals would likely increase year over year due to inflation. Manufacturing jobs have the greatest multiplier effect of any other industry due to the feedstock required to make the finished good and the distribution of that good to market. This model shows that through the high-value design management companies, truck transportation, and the other medical and educational fields that are portrayed in the study. The yearly tax impact from ongoing operations would amount to $184 million per year, with $52 million going to the state, $85 million to the federal government, and the remaining to county and local. In a 5-year snapshot, Assuming 4 years of construction and 1 year of operation, the combined totals show that the project would support a total of 31,248 jobs, $2.7 billion in labor income, $4.3 billion in gross state product, and $7.1 billion in total output, equaling $714 million of tax revenue. In addition to the study, we have outlined 6 policy initiatives to best attract and retain investment of this type. First, permitting reform for pipelines and other critical infrastructure. PA lost on significant business investment in the past due to slow and cumbersome process to connect major end users of natural gas to feedstock via pipelines. Policymakers should prioritize streamlining the permitting process to support infrastructure connections to industrial end users. Second, permitting reform on construction of new manufacturing and other commercial facilities. Similar to pipeline and infrastructure challenges, manufacturers face backlogs of new construction and expansion permits. PA's land use requirements are far more strict than federal standards, and this should be amended for uniformity and simplicity. Third, a focus on workforce training programs. According to Implan, 30% of the jobs that this model requires a certificate, college, or an associate's degree or equivalent. In Delaware County, 24% currently possess the needed levels of this certification. The public sector needs to assist in identifying areas of need and expand local best practices to meet the needs of the workforce to maximize the number of Pennsylvanians who can work and benefit from these projects. Fourth, this is a federal issue, but it warrants mentioning. Amend or provide temporary relief from the Jones Act. Currently, the Jones Act requires goods shipped between U.S. ports to be transported on ships that were built, owned, and operated by the United States citizens or permanent residents. Therefore, American LNG cannot be sent between U.S. ports unless it is on a U.S.-built and flagged carrier. At present, there are no U.S. flagged LNG carriers, and thus no American LNG can be transported from port to port. Relief from the Jones Act is needed. Fifth, we must enhance Pennsylvania's business competitiveness. This is very general, but the goal of Pennsylvania policymakers should be to make it the smart business decision for employers to locate, expand, and hire here in this Commonwealth rather than in one of our competitor states. And lastly, on January 26, 2024, the Biden administration announced a pause on the permitting of all new LNG export facilities. The Biden blockade must be reversed for any new LNG terminal development in the United States. Without this, all other policy recommendations in this testimony are moot. The dangerous and damaging policy is being challenged by several states, and I would encourage Pennsylvania to join in that challenge. Ultimately, we have more than enough natural gas to economically meet the needs of our Commonwealth citizens while stabilizing the industry by opening new worldwide export channels. Utilizing Pennsylvania natural gas to fuel our allies is good for Pennsylvania, good for the United States, and good for the world geopolitical stability as a whole. We do it safer, cleaner, and with more economic and environmental benefit here than anywhere else in the world. The model here provides a snapshot of what could be, but it will be dependent on policymakers to ensure a business and regulatory environment to make it a reality. Thank you.
Mr. Bain.
Okay, you got me. Chairman Kale, Secretary and Chairwoman White, I'm referring to the LNG Task Force. Thank you for all your help on that. And members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to participate in today's hearing. My name is John Bain, Director of Government Affairs for EQT, the country's leading producer of natural gas. Our headquarters are in Pittsburgh, and current operations are in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. We're certainly not new to this state. We've been here for 130 years. We produce roughly 6 billion cubic feet per day of natural gas. That's equivalent to 1 million barrels of oil per day. This production represents 5% of the country's natural gas. Every day, our nearly 1,000 employees, alongside our 25,000-person contractor base, are on a mission to make the energy we produce cheaper, more reliable, and more importantly, cleaner. In addition to the jobs we support, over the past few years, EQT has averaged nearly $1 billion in payments to landowners. So these are royalty owners who agreed to work with EQT to allow us the privilege of producing natural gas, and they have received, as I said, nearly $1 billion in payments to landowners. We also send funds and fees to states and schools to build hospitals, roads, and bridges. These stories of opportunity are not unique to Appalachia states. They echo across the 38 states that host natural gas production. Across the United States, roughly 15% of our natural gas is exported as U.S. LNG. For EQT alone, it's fair to say that 15% of our landowner payments, or $150 million, to Appalachian families is the direct result of LNG exports. Clearly, Pennsylvania natural gas has had a tremendous positive impact on our state, country, and I think it's fitting to mention it today, our world. Yet here we are talking about another effort to block projects that will create thousands of high-paying jobs, lower global emissions, and provide energy security to the world. This president's pause on new LNG authorizations is clearly a political stunt orchestrated to satisfy a vocal minority of individuals who simply want to end the industry that I work in and that my colleagues work in and that Rob works in. Both President Obama and President Trump executed similar reviews, however, did not pause the issuance of LNG permits. Can we think of two presidents who are further apart on issues? Neither one of them found any reason to pause the issuance of LNG permits. It wasn't long ago that our country was importing natural gas. Today, thanks to the shale gas revolution, our country finds itself in a position of energy independence and prosperity as opposed to relying on Russia, Iran, or Qatar for our natural gas needs. What were once import facilities are now being converted to export facilities. As I previously stated, the pause on LNG export approvals is purely political, a move that is touted as a win for climate, but in reality it is a significant step backwards for lowering emissions across the globe. When you look at the data, it's undeniable that the United States is not the problem when it comes to global emissions. We are the solution. Thanks to the shale gas revolution over the last 2 decades, not only has the U.S. had the lowest energy costs in the world, we have also led the world in emissions reductions. Natural gas, a large portion of which was produced right here in Pennsylvania, single-handedly contributed to over 60% of the emissions reductions in the United States since the turn of the century. Think of that, 60% of the emissions reduction in the U.S. can be attributed to American natural gas. Since 2019, EQT alone has decreased our methane intensity by 70%. This was not due to political forces or new regulations. We chose to do this because it is simply the right thing to do. However, there are people, some right here in this building, that do not want to accept the facts. Comically, it is the gas that I'm talking about, Pennsylvania gas, not Russia's gas, not Iran's gas, not coal from China, that the administration is seeking to block from entering global markets. Taking our cleaner, more affordable gas out of the global market is a gift to Russia, Iran, and China. Now's not the time to slow down LNG. Now's the time to accelerate it if we are serious about addressing global emissions. And that's one thing that I think my fellow testifiers will both talk about today, one who already has. It's global emissions. That's what we're talking about. We hear all the time about global warming. We're doing our part in the United States. Right now, we have the opportunity to do this across the entire globe and lower global emissions. So emissions, energy security, and national security aside, the economic benefits of natural gas have changed the lives of hundreds of thousands of Pennsylvanians. As Americans, we're blessed to live in a country with abundant natural resources, and we're fortunate to have the privilege of being able to debate energy policy. As lawmakers, you make decisions that impact jobs, the environment, grid reliability, education, and other issues of great importance. Unfortunately, there are many countries in this world that do not allow for such open and honest debates. However, if we're able to provide them with our abundant resources, they may just follow our lead when it comes to reducing emissions. We cannot afford to keep politicizing American energy. We cannot afford to keep politicizing Pennsylvania energy. There is simply too much at stake. It isn't time to pause LNG. It is time to unleash Pennsylvania and United States LNG. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Bear.
Well, you guys all have my testimony, so I'm not going to read it all. This comes down to a real simple fact. We were charged with, by the year 2050, to be net neutral. Nobody can deny that for the next 10 to 15 years, natural gas has got to be one of the biggest players in this. You cannot deny that natural gas is cleaner than coal and much of our other resources. We have to utilize natural gas if we want to meet climate emission goals. There's just no two ways about it. LNG is a linchpin to helping with the global emissions, but also to helping with the emissions in the United States of America. All right? When you heard the gentleman to my left testify, we don't have an LNG Jones Act ship. Representative White and I had this very discussion. I have a shipyard in Philly that can build one to spur one hell of a lot of economic impact in Pennsylvania alone to transport LNG to the Northeast to quit people from burning fuel oil. And as somebody that only has one option at his house to burn fuel oil, I would love to be able to burn LNG at my home. I know what my emissions are going at my flue all winter long. What's my option? All right? We have to be realist that if we want to accumulate credit and lower emissions, gas and PA gas has to be the biggest part of this. All right? We have the workforce, and with all deference to the modeling, I'm living the modeling. I know how many jobs I'm not doing with my members. I know how many of my people that work in the industrial sector aren't doing anything, and we haven't for the last 5 years, and that's unacceptable. I've had this very conversation with your counterparts across the aisle. I've had this conversation at length with the governor. Gas has to be a big part of this. We need LNG. We need LNG in PA. When we talk about pipelines, that's a very hot button issue. I understand that. But let's review how we did pipelines wrong the last 20 years. We didn't have PA people working on those projects. We didn't have people that live in those communities building out the infrastructure. Now, let's change that. You want me to put a pipeline safe in the ground for you with my people? I'd be happy to. Because if it's my kids at the bus stop, you can bet it's going to be the best weld you've ever seen in your life. And we're going to spur economic impact with PA workers. And we're going to build out an LNG facility with PA workers. And we're going to have our downstream jobs with PA workers. And we can build that Jones Act ship right here in Philadelphia. We have that capability. Do you know how many jobs that would create in that shipyard alone? That's my Boilermakers. That's the people that I represent every day. Now, I see Representative Rosen down there, and he knows if I could build an LNG on the Juniata River, I'd be the first one in line to do it right down from my house and put all those jobs where we need them in a rural county. Unfortunately, I can't get a barge that far up. We can do this safely. And let's really talk about what our goals are. Where do we want to be? Where is compromise? We can't be scorched earth. If you truly want to get to net neutral, we've lost 5 years already. Now, you let me use LNG for the next 10 years, and I lower greenhouse gas emissions 3% per year for the next 10 years. That's 30%. By the time we get to 2034, 2035, are we going to have more baseload generation with nuclear power, hydro, geothermal, more wind, more solar? Of course we are. And then we could be more aggressive for the next 10 years and make a goal of lowering 5% a year for the next 10 years, which is another 50%. And that gets us to 80%. And the last 5 years, 4% a year. But we have to get started. We have done nothing but argue for the last 5 years. We haven't moved the needle on climate. We haven't created any jobs. We haven't accomplished permitting reform, which is drastically needed in this state, as you've heard. And we also need to make policy that we're going to do this with PA workers. It doesn't do me any good to employ people from Texas and Oklahoma in our natural gas industry. As my partner sitting directly to my left knows, I do the work for EQT. I do the work for the Marcellus Shale Coalition. I build the generation. But without permitting reform, we're not even building more generation. Forget the fact that you have a policy that wants to penalize people. We're not building it, period, because we can't get it permitted. All right, and I I'm not going to sit here and pretend to tell you I have an idea what the Biden administration was thinking. I know I've expressed my displeasure. I know I have been down to meet with Senator Casey and Senator Fetterman and said, look, if we're not going to use our gas and our LNG, you might as well just roll up the carpet, turn out the lights, because we're not going to accomplish anything. I'm a realist in this. I had lived this for 37 years. This is what I do. I build things and my people build things. When you drive by a nuke in Pennsylvania, I probably had my people build it. I've built how many of your gas plants, John? Probably 85 to 90% of them. Many of that gentleman's manufacturing plants and industrial sites across Pennsylvania we've built, and we're proud of it. And for the last 5 years, we haven't done anything. Nothing. Nothing. That's unacceptable. We have a chance here in this building to use the political will to do LNG. I have specifically asked the governor to talk to the White House about this. I asked the governor to send a letter on repealing the 45Vs. He did, because we're not going to do hydrogen if we don't repeal those. And guess what? You know what's going to be a big part of hydrogen? Natural gas. If you want to do industrial decarbonization, I'm going to need LNG and I'm going to need natural gas, because if you think you're going to get enough hydrogen from electrolysis, well, I'm here to tell you you're probably not. Natural gas is going to be a linchpin to accomplishing the goals that we all want. And if we're not going to utilize it, and we're not going to build it here, then I'm going to sit here and tell you by the time I'm retired, it's not going to make a difference. There'll be other people in your chairs sitting up there. Hopefully I will be on my boat in Florida retired, pretending I'm a pirate, and we're not going to make a difference in the economic development in Pennsylvania. The governor has in his budget $500 million for shovel-ready sites. That's a good start. But if I don't have an energy policy and a gas policy, who's coming? What are you going to do with those sites? Who are you going to attract? Well, that's a simple answer. Nobody. They're not coming. Now, there has to be people willing to sit and talk about this and have serious discussions. There's going to be compromise. I understand these are very, very divisive issues. They always are. But at the end of the day, if you want to put Pennsylvanians to work, if you want to spur industrial and manufacturing and have true economic development in the state of Pennsylvania, then natural gas is going to be at the front of this bus. It's driving it. There's no two ways about it. I'll be happy to take any questions. You've heard me say many times, I'm okay with natural gas. I want to use it. We have a resource under our feet. Have we made some mistakes in the past? Yes. Yes, we have. And John's team, my guys, we've all admitted it. We've learned from our mistakes. We've corrected them. All right? You know that old saying, we're not going to make an omelet if we don't break an egg or two. Well, that's with everything we do in Pennsylvania. All right? But the wise people are the ones that learn from the mistakes to correct it and move forward. And that's what we have to do for this Commonwealth. We have to put our natural gas to work. I know I want to be able to tour the Philly shipyard with Representative White and watch a Jones Act ship being built. All right? I want to see our gas going to my friends in the Northeast. I'm tired. I am tired of losing to Texas and Alabama and Louisiana and the Gulf Coast on energy issues. I'm tired of watching people work down there and not Pennsylvania workers. I don't want my people to pack a suitcase and leave Pennsylvania a year at a time to build things everywhere other than here. I want to put people that live in these communities to work in these communities. I want to build it safely. I want to build it effectively. I would like the impact fees to triple because we're putting that much natural gas into LNG, which, as Representative Kephart and I had spoke this morning, the impact fees for our local communities are huge. And how do we increase them? We'll increase the volume of gas. I mean, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. I'm just a simple electrician sitting here in front of you. but I think I have a pretty good handle on economic development. And it comes down to a lot of common sense. And it comes down to a little bit of that dirty word at times, compromise. And I think if we're all willing to sit and compromise a little bit, we can build an energy policy and a gas policy for Pennsylvania that puts Pennsylvanians first. Thank you.
Thank you. Secretary White.
Well, thank each of you for your testimony today. I really appreciate this conversation. I'd like to just start off with, could you speak to what I had mentioned previously about PJM and the energy electricity crisis that is looming here in Pennsylvania and how we should immediately take action to address it? Are there a list of maybe top priorities that you feel should us as legislators be moving on the House floor in government here in Pennsylvania to make sure that that looming crisis does not happen?
So we are going to have an energy crisis in Pennsylvania. And I'm going to tread carefully here because if anybody holds PJM accountable, it's me. And we have some serious issues with PJM. But what is a fact is we're probably going to be retiring about 27,000 megawatts of existing generation off PJM within the next 6 to 8 years. If you look at where we're moving in the energy sector, probably by 2032, we're going to need an additional 27,000 megawatts, which is a derivative of about 54,000 megawatts. And PJM, Pennsylvania, and the whole PJM as a grid as a whole right now doesn't have any way to figure out how we're going to make that shortfall up. What I can tell you is we're not going to build out that much renewable energy. So gas has to play a part in this. Are we going to need additional gas baseload generation? Yeah, we are. Are we going to be able to do it without permitting reform? No, we're not. And that's a problem. That's a big problem. You know, permitting reform has to be a start. You know, now, that being said, PJM needs to do some things on their end too. And I will tell you, our energy industry has been working with PJM to help. Our generators are struggling. Our capacity payments are almost nothing, which makes it very tough on my generators now. And I think that with some permitting reform, I think with some PJM reform that I'm going to need you guys to help with. Representative Kale has seen me crucify PJM more than once. I think we could get there. But permitting reform has got to be one of the biggest priorities for this building to take up. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question for John. Do you see major issues? Obviously, we're in competition with our surrounding states, Ohio, Virginia, you name it, when it comes to energy. I was wondering for your organization, to the extent you can speak to it, what is your experience when it comes to Pennsylvania, say on investor calls or financiers who are trying to find places to invest in, and what that means for Pennsylvania specifically?
Sure. I won't speak directly to EQT, but I'll speak more generally. It's very difficult to do business right now. In Pennsylvania, I'll give you one example, and I'm sure, try and contain yourself, but the Renovo planned natural gas plant, it was canceled. They walked away from that project. And it wasn't because the local community did not want it there. They wanted it there. Rob wanted it there. People in that area of the state wanted it there. However, we deal with outside forces that just continue to delay until they finally break people who are trying to build things. West Virginia is a different story. People are making investments in West Virginia. Ohio, same. It's just very difficult right now, and a lot of it is outside forces. And these forces that want to block everything, they like to point to the industry as a problem, saying they don't like the industry, they don't like fossil fuels. All they want to do is have the industry just disappear and go away. Well, it's easy to do that. It's easy to talk about things and say you don't like them. What's difficult is to come together and figure out a solution that everyone can agree to and address the problem that you're claiming exist, and that's what we're missing right now. There's just too much toxicity in the messaging from the other side, and I think the natural gas industry, we are doing everything we can to make Pennsylvania better, make the United States better, and then make the globe better.
I have to add on this. I mean, with environmental opposition, it's gone from activism to obstructionism. And that obstructionism and keeping projects from happening in Pennsylvania doesn't lessen energy demand. It just means that it comes from somewhere else. I mean, the topic for today with LNG, that somewhere else is Russia, Saudi Arabia, Qatar. For electricity demand, that somewhere else is West Virginia or Ohio. West Virginia, last legislative session, passed a bill citing Pennsylvania's environmental progress and lowered emissions through utilizing natural gas for electricity generation, a bill to expedite and incentivize natural gas power plant production in West Virginia. So they're using examples of our environmental success to make it a better business decision for investors to set up natural gas electricity generation in West Virginia. Meanwhile, since Governor Wolf unilaterally entered us in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative 5 years ago, there has not been a single investment in natural gas power plants, but we have taken plants offline, some of which prematurely. But we have not been able to replace that capacity because of the regulatory environment that we're dealing with.
One thing that you guys could possibly take a look at helping with too, and I'll use this word that sometimes makes people cringe. Anybody that was here in 2022 knows we did a very big tax credit package to incentivize industry. Now, one of the things that I have even talked to the environmentalists about, look, if we want to lower greenhouse gas emissions from our gas plants, we're down to pretty much one way and one way only, and that's carbon capture, carbon sequestration. But what we haven't had is anybody introduce legislation in Pennsylvania to incentivize our companies to start carbon capture, carbon sequestration. Now, I can take you to Texas and I can take you to California where Calpine's doing it right now. But how are they doing it? They're doing it with a combination of stackable tax credits from the IIJA and with state investment. Now, if you want to clean up gas much more, there's really no other way, and I think John will agree with me. But carbon capture, carbon sequestration has to be a big part of this conversation. And how do we invest? How do we get private equity to invest in this? Well, we got to have public input and public buy-in too. And that's something that we need to take a look at. I've talked to the industries about it. I've talked to the environmental communities about it. And that's another way that Pennsylvania can lead the charge. Because right now in the Northeast, nobody's doing carbon capture, carbon sequestration. And we can use that carbon as a byproduct too. But guess what? It's going to take a public investment. We spend funds of a public body all the time and argue about what did we get out of it. Investing in carbon capture is investing in jobs right out of the gate. And people say, well, it's a gift to the industry. No, it's not. We're incentivizing people to explore new technology to accomplish our goals and expand our generation base. Thank you.
All right, we have a hard stop at 11:30, so if the members that are on the list could keep it brief so we can get everybody in, that would be wonderful. Representative Kephart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank you guys for attending this important hearing today. You guys said this before, but I also want to comment, Mr. Bain, you brought up Renova, and I won't get into all that. Rob and I have had a long exchange on that before. I don't live very far from there. I think you got more sticker. I come down off the hill behind there the one day. I think you guys got more, nameplates around than about anybody. But we've been talking about this, about where this gas would come from. Can you tell me where the Nord Stream pipeline runs? It's a little bit outside, not a pipeline in the United States per se, but I was just curious if you could tell me where that runs from.
It's overseas and comes out of Russia.
Russia, right, into northern Germany, if I'm not mistaken, right? Yeah. So So who is the biggest importers to Europe outside the United States of natural gas?
I would say Europe.
Well, yeah, to who imports into Europe?
Exports, Russia.
Russia.
Yeah,
Sure.
sorry, yeah, exports into Russia, yeah, Iran.
Sure.
Those are some good characters, yeah. So, Mr. Bear, how many of those jobs are in Pennsylvania if we are, taken out of Russia?
Well, I can tell you, I've never had anybody work on any of those pipelines. And we've never built any of those gas plants. That's pretty much a fact. Now, I would love to replace that with our people. I don't think I would ever be able to go to work over there, being that I'm not multilingual and I don't speak Russian. And quite frankly, I don't want to go over there. I just get really frustrated knowing that we can do this correctly, we can do this safely, and what we can do economically for this Commonwealth. Okay? I don't think we need the Nord Stream pipeline. We don't, if we do this correctly. And look, what did we learn about Europe? Europe tried to do a lot of green energy over the last 20 years. They fell short. They're using coal to generate electricity. Now, that's a problem. Not for my miners, because we're shipping a lot of coal over there, but if you want to talk about the environment, oh, that's a problem. Imagine if we took those coal burners, because we provided enough LNG exports, and we converted them to natural gas, and we lowered the greenhouse gas emissions over Europe 50% by using John's gas. That's moving the needle on climate change, folks, in a big way.
Yeah, so I appreciate you bringing that up because I don't want you to have to go over there either. We can export LNG over there that your workers here in Pennsylvania can make. I mean, as far as the coal goes, I'm always going to be in favor of shipping our coal over there too. So right out of Pennsylvania as well. So, but anyhow, I want to thank you guys for being here. I mean, this is a critical issue to Pennsylvania. It puts Pennsylvania to work. Over $1 billion you mentioned just from your company goes to landowners in Pennsylvania. I mean, that's huge for rural Appalachia people like myself. So thank you guys for hosting this.
Representative Barton.
Thank you, gentlemen, and I would also say that, Mr. Baer, you talked about how long the green movement's going on. It started in Germany right after World War II, so it's a lot longer than 20 years. And what's Germany's reliance on Nord Stream pipeline in Russia? When that got cut off, what did they do? This summer, they were tearing down perfectly good wind turbines to mine the coal underneath them. Perfectly good wind turbines to mine the coal under them. So we need to embrace our, and Mr. Baer, I was right there with you when you were talking passionately about specifically we could be the next Texas, and I don't want to be the next Texas. I'm proud to be from Pennsylvania. I'm proud to live here. I'm proud to breathe here, drink this water, raise my family here. So that's great. So I do have a question, and I guess, Mr. Bain, it'd be directed towards you. And we've talked about LNG all day long, but we haven't brought up CNG. And it's only, and I'm just curious about that because compressed natural gas we see often in the vehicles now. Wegmans is a New York company, but they have a huge presence here in Pennsylvania, and they just switched to CNG. Can you share with me, I guess CNG is going to be heavier, it's going to be a little bulkier, a lot bulkier, but can you share with me why LNG is going to be better for us than CNG? Is that a fair question to ask?
Yeah, I would say you do see a lot of the over-the-road trucks right now being converted to CNG. I previously had a CNG Chevy Tahoe when I first started at EQT. But LNG is critical because that's the vehicle used to ship natural gas when you're exporting. It would not be CNG. So I would say that's the primary difference. I hope that helps answer your question.
Yeah, so it's, and that's exactly what I was hoping your answer would be. It's our opportunity to ship this, be an exporter, not just for Pennsylvania, but for the United States of America.
Yeah.
In shipping this, our clean natural gas overseas.
Yep, and the opportunity is just, it's huge. We have the gas in the United States to change the world, and we just need to be able to unleash that American energy.
Thank you.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Great testimony. I remember just a few years ago at PMA, the German delegation was here, a room full of Germans saying how they wanted to buy and set up this, and that was even before the Ukraine war. You know, the things we're talking about today aren't surprises, but the inaction is a continued frustration. My question across the board is, you know, kind of building on if we really want to talk about what our goals are. You know, I'm trying to sort through what I see as double talk, particularly within this administration. You know, there is discussion that we want to win and get stuff done, but they're funding the lawsuit against Reggie. They rolled out environmental justice. They're marketing a Pennsylvania cap and trade. I think an opportunity in this budget, because we do need to take action. You know, we've been working on language, $15 million for test wells in southwestern Pennsylvania that DEP, DCNR secretaries both supported. The governor and Secretary of Revenue have not yet supported or agreed to that, and that is a key first step forward in carbon capture, regardless where you stand on it. I'd like to hear your perspective on, we know we have geology, it's so deep that nobody knows actually what's going on down there. Can you touch on the importance of getting started with test wells that would have publicly accessible information so that private industry would know what's going on in Pennsylvania's geology?
Yeah, I think, first and foremost, we have to pass some regulations to allow for carbon capture. I know the Senate is taking up a bill probably in the near future, and that's something, Representative White, that will be hopefully coming to your chamber where we could use help with that carbon capture regulations. But I think anything we can do to move forward and analyze that geology to see where this would and would not work in Pennsylvania, as you said, is critical. I know that Pennsylvania Geological Survey has done a lot of work on that. Our team is already starting to look at that sort of thing as we're part of the ARCH2 hydrogen hub, which would involve carbon capture. But I think it's relative all across the state because of you know, our footprint of power plants.
And I'm not going to speak for the governor, but what I would say is, in the governor's defense, when he rolled his energy plan out, and you guys saw I was there with him, and I said there were some things I probably didn't like, there were some the environmentalists didn't like. I would honestly say I believe the governor is willing to engage now on a lot of different fronts. All right. One of the reasons why he rolled an energy plan out, he called me like 2 months ago and he said, I'm very frustrated, nobody's doing anything. And I said to him, well, there's two people in this call, and one of them's a governor that could do an energy plan. And he did. Now, I think what we need is we need some counter proposals. We need engaging dialogue. I do believe, and I have spoke to the governor at length about carbon capture, carbon sequestration. I've spoke to him about natural gas. I've spoke to him about blue hydrogen, explained to him the importance of it. I spoke to him about the importance of closing AEPS on the tier 1 so that we keep those jobs in state, and they'll spend $154 million in green energy jobs out of state. And I think he's amenable to it. But what he's really going to be looking for is he's going to be looking for meaningful dialogue. And I know that's going to be tough, but I truly believe that if we're going to come up with something, we're going to actually have to have those very hard conversations. And as I explained to him, look, we can't always win and we can't always lose, but there has to be a middle ground here. Natural gas has to be a key part to this, all right? Economic development in Pennsylvania is going to hinge on our natural gas for the foreseeable future. It has to. It's the #1 thing we have to export, all right? It's our #1 energy producer next to nuclear power, and it drives economic development in Pennsylvania. You know, you guys have a very tough job working through the budget and working with them, but I would say, in my opinion, I think we're at a better point this year than we were last year.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Schlegel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll be brief, and I really appreciate gentlemen for being here today. I'm going to ask this question because I think it's so powerful, and your testimony was so very articulate. So For the benefit of my constituents back in the 101st and Lebanon County, could you please speak to the environmental benefits of using Pennsylvania natural gas?
Yeah, I mean, the opportunity before us is huge. We have enough natural gas in Pennsylvania to literally change the world. And I don't think people realize what that opportunity looks like, but it's massive. And if we are able to keep producing natural gas and exporting that natural gas, you have to keep in mind that exports, surplus means exports. So we're exporting, we have a surplus, we're backfilling that. So we're producing more gas because we can rely and plan our business on exporting that natural gas. So there's the narrative where the pricing will go up because of exports. Well, that's not true. We're exporting, we're producing more, we're filling that hole. It makes sense from an economic standpoint. So the opportunity here is just massive.
I'm going to add a real life example. So a community that does not have natural gas production, but outside of Philadelphia, there was a new pipeline that was getting installed. There's a manufacturer, a very large manufacturer that had a facility, about 600 jobs, I believe, in a community, again, in the outskirts of Philadelphia. A lot of manufacturers need a lot of energy, and to create, a lot of times, to create heat in those different processes. There really is no alternative than a fossil fuel for some of those processes right now. A lot of manufacturers also utilize what's called cogen. So that's whenever you almost have like a mini power plant that is on the site of the manufacturing facility that provides your power but also provides industrial inputs. The cogen facility for this manufacturing facility utilized coal. This plant was going to be shut down. It was going to be moved out of the state because it was no longer economically feasible and because of the environmental impacts to the community. When the natural gas pipeline was proposed, they realized that the new pipeline was less than a mile away from that facility. So they were able to convert that cogen facility from coal to natural gas. It saved the plant, it saved the 600 jobs in that community, and they reduced emissions at that facility by 45%. That's a success story. I mean, that's the opportunity that natural gas can provide. And I mean, given your part of the Commonwealth, a community that loses its manufacturer is a community that loses its community. When those manufacturers shut down and go out of state, massive voids are left in their wake, and entire communities, entire tax bases vanish. So that is as positive of a success story that I could possibly point to, environmentally, economically, and from a community standpoint.
Thank you.
All right. So we are going to wrap this up. I just wanted to say thank you to the testifiers and have a few brief comments myself. I just always find it remarkable. And Mr. Baer, you had mentioned something in your testimony, and it's always used, and I'm not trying to throw daggers or be critical of anything here, but just people talk about the energy transition. I actually think that's a bogus term. I think we ought to be saying the energy maybe reformation and start thinking about carbon capture and stuff like that, because over the last 20 years, we've seen $9.5 trillion of investment in renewable energy. And it's gone from 3% to 4% of our generation assets. And by the way, over the same course of time, emissions have gone through the roof. The only practical way to reduce carbon emissions is to use Pennsylvania energy. If that's the concern that we have, the only practical way, it doesn't matter what you say, what kind of language you use, it doesn't matter if you cloak yourself in green righteousness or not. The only practical way to reduce our emissions is to use our energy sources. And we saw it in Germany. It was mentioned earlier. You saw it in Germany. They had this Green New Deal for Germany. It was a great example. Then you have one pipeline get blown up and a tyrant going in and attacking other countries, and their whole energy grid is in shambles. It wasn't renewables that came to save the day. It was coal. And now it's going to be American liquefied natural gas coming from, hopefully, from Pennsylvania. I think you guys have established clearly, without a shadow of a doubt, that the world is a better place with Pennsylvania energy. It's good for our jobs. It's good for our consumers. It's good for our allies. It's good for everything across the globe, our environment. And we have those answers right here, and I'm happy that we do. So the Policy Committee will begin on a new series of hearings across the state to discuss pro-business tax reform coming at the end of this week. April 11th will be in Columbia County with Representative Ledbeater. April 12th will be in Northampton County with Representative Mako. April 18th will be in Lancaster County with Representative Tom Jones. Right now, we will have a press conference in the main rotunda starting 2 minutes ago. So until then, this committee is adjourned.